Om Shanti. We'll resume the chapter Anti-Om Mandali Party. One of the observers of the assault on the record said, "Oh God, what an unfortunate land India has become. Not only has the ancient wisdom been forgotten, but even common sense is lost. Ignorance and blind faith in the scriptures, many of which had been expanded or changed so much that the original message had been lost, now led them to astray to the extent that an institution like Om Mandali could be mistaken for an evil force. But then it is a fact of life that if an individual opens a shop to sell real diamonds beside a shop which sells fake ones, many people will believe his diamonds are also fake or also false. Even if he gives every assurance possible of the truth and value of his gems, people will have no confidence. It is a rare individual who will be able to depend on his own intellect and use impartial judgment and thus buy a diamond from such an individual. And so it also happens when the Supreme Father arrives to give away diamonds of knowledge. How many can discern the one true merchant from the many false ones? The entire household of the Mukhi was in an uproar. The Mukhi himself was fear stricken. He was Baba's brother in law, yet suddenly a barrier of prejudice fell between them. Baba's daughter, Nirmal Shanta, had fled from her father in law's home several days earlier during a family quarrel. Now she would not go back. When the news began to spread about the broken relationship between these two personalities, others quickly took sides. Those who had long held secret grudges against Tata Lake Raj now came out to join forces with the Mukhi. Such one person was a wealthy businessman who had once asked for Brahma Baba's help in a personal matter and was refused. What happened was that his son had died, and afterwards there was a quarrel with the daughter in law as to the proper division of property. The daughter in law lived nearby, and she often came to Brahma Baba's satsang. So the man asked Brahma Baba to pressure her into giving up fighting for the property. Brahma Baba refused the request. Firstly, because it was a personal matter in which he thought it improper to interfere with, and secondly, because the woman had a legal right to the property. The businessman, however, who had been an old friend of Baba's, had not dreamt his request would be refused. His anger over this had never diminished. Now both of them, the Mukhi and this businessman, worked actively in the anti-Om Mandali party, pouring money into that group's coffers in order to achieve a single objective: bring Om Mandali down. Their strategy was to fight the families of those who attended the satsang, to spread false rumors about Brahma Baba's teachings, and to secretly pressure the government into prohibiting Om Mandali from operating. The strategy worked well, and soon many households were keeping their daughters under lock and key. The more superstitious ones and the more worried husbands put sometimes 5 or 7 locks on the door and kept the woman under strict surveillance. Often they even deprived them of food, and there were even cases of women being physically chained to their beds and beaten day after day until they would agree to give up their desire to attend Baba's satsang. Despite this fierce pressure, the woman did not submit. The next chapter is The Battle of Good and Evil. Prophets, saints, sages, innovative scientists, philosophers, artists, those who have brought humanity its greatest messages and who embodied the highest ideals have always had to suffer. History is replete with such atrocities. And when do such messengers and great souls descend? At those critical moments when old concepts no longer hold true, when prevailing systems have become bankrupt, when a limited perspective must give way to a new vision. Yet the visionary is rarely treated with decency, for he threatens vested interests, established identities, and power structures. So the hardships and calamities repeat themselves in predictable patterns. Such now was the case with Brahmababa. But he thought threatened the most vested interest of all, the ego. Brahmababa made it clear that the soul must learn to live in a soul conscious way. He showed that lust is never far from violence. Now God was ordering his children to conquer lust, to destroy all their weaknesses, bad habits, and body consciousness, and to become his angels once again. Shiv Baba was hurling the ultimate challenge at Ravan, or Satan, meaning the five vices of lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. And so, of course, Ravan responded with every weapon at his command. The battle was on. Only 100 years earlier in India, people had thrown rocks at Swami Dayanand Saraswati for his plain speaking. He exhorted people to be righteous, and in return, he was bullied, threatened, and finally poisoned. Likewise, people had welcomed Jesus Christ by hanging him on a cross. The prophet Abraham before him was severely opposed for his demand that people give up their remembrance of idols and worship one God. When Buddha counseled people to discard the distinctions of caste and to live according to the principles of right conduct and right understanding, he was met with angry jeers, and even his own relatives opposed him. When Muhammad began preaching about righteousness, he was opposed so violently that he was forced to flee his home in Mecca to save his life. Again, the line of great souls of India who were made to suffer for their righteousness is long and legendary. Guru Nanak was arrested and put to forced labor. Tej Bahadur was beheaded. Mira had to drink a cup of poison. Another sage had his skin peeled off. Yet another's children were cemented alive inside a wall. Every saint has had to suffer in 1,000 other ways. And of course, though most of these saints lived long ago, there is also a very recent martyr who led India to independence, preaching and practicing nonviolence, truth, and celibacy. Mahatma Gandhi's fame is worldwide, yet he was shot dead by an assassin's bullet. Anyone who cuts a new path must be prepared for criticism and hardship, for people are loath to change their ways. Whether a scientist like Galileo or a political dissident like Solzhenitsyn, anyone who upsets the accepted paradigm will not have an easy time. Charges will be hurled, abuses thrown, and one cannot be delicate. Perhaps the most difficult test for a harbinger of new ideas is to see his own friends desert him. Society's memory is short, and the good that one does is soon forgotten. The obligations which are owed go, go unmentioned, and at the same time, the smallest mistake is pounced on as if it were a serious offense. Worse still, there are always expert talkers, the orthodox, the powerful, and the prejudiced, who for selfish purposes can twist the minds of the people and make them believe the most blatant lies. Such was the pattern of oppression which now befell Brahma Baba and Om Mandali. And yet Brahma Baba did not flinch. He did not get angry. He did not even consider fighting back. And the work of teaching, of disseminating God's message went on as usual. Shiv Baba continued to descend each day and speak the knowledge Murli for all who wanted to listen. The school kept operating also, and Mamma ran the institution as before, with firmness and great gentleness. The people of Hyderabad expected Brahma Baba to react more strongly to the threatening events that seemed about to overtake him, but they were disappointed. They did not understand that Brahma Baba was not responsible for this institution. He had been simply a householder and a businessman. He had never been a scholar or a guru, nor did he claim to be one now. These teachings of purity and complete celibacy did not spring from his own mind, and at first he had been more surprised about them than anyone else. After all, how could one expect ordinary householders, married men and women, to become celibate? It was unheard of. Men who wished to attain such heights of renunciation in the past had run away to caves or distant jungles. Could two people of opposite sex really hope to remain together and still banish all thoughts of lust? Neither Dada Lekraj nor anyone else could have imagined that such a thing was possible. It would take divine power to achieve such a result on any widespread basis. And of course, it was achieved. Many couples were living in purity together, and many more women were determined to do so despite all obstacles. The harassment of women went on, yet they did not give in. This also was cause for amazement by the people of Sindh, for the women of Sindh had always submitted to the will of their husbands and fathers. It baffled the mind even to think that these poor girls could stand up to such established figures of power. Women who had been forced to wear veils over their faces, who had been trained their whole lives to remain silent and submissive in the presence of menfolk and to stay at home like caged birds. Such women were suddenly invincible, filled with spiritual might. They discoursed more eloquently and deeply than any guru, teaching the highest knowledge of all. Where did they get such drive, such an intellect, such inner strength? They put up with physical abuse, beatings, starvation, and public humiliation, yet they did not budge from their principles. Whose power was behind such a phenomenon? Outside, people saw Brahma Baba only with their two physical eyes. Their intellect was closed. So they were unable to comprehend that the Supreme Father, Shiva, had descended in Baba's physical frame and was teaching his own profound and absolute knowledge. Thus these people remained helpless in the grip of their rigid habits. Brahma Baba was also helpless, but he was helpless in the grip of God. He used to quote a Sindhi proverb, Vat vende Brahmin vato, meaning a Brahmin going along the road minding his own business was captured by someone. For that is what happened to Dada Lekhraj. He was going happily along the road of life in charge of a successful business and a large family when the Supreme Soul stopped him and began to use his body to teach the value of purity. Thus did Baba unexpectedly become God's instrument. Okay, we'll pause here for the day and resume tomorrow. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.